The chair calls the Education Policy Committee meeting to order for Wednesday, January 22nd, 2025. And our committee legislative assistant has already noted that we have a quorum, so thank you. We're going to ask for members to take a look at the minutes if you could and make sure they're accurate. And Rep. Mueller, if you've had a chance to review those minutes for Tuesday, January 21st, 2025, could you please move approval of the minutes?
Chair Bennett, I have, and I move that we adopt the minutes, please.
And all those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed, nay. All right, the ayes have it. The minutes for Tuesday, January 21st, 2025 are approved. So members, today we are honored with some special guests in our room here. Happy about this, excited to hear from them. From people from school districts around our state, our area, to share with share with us their perspectives on the 65 plus new mandates and other restrictions imposed on our schools by various legislation passed over the last couple of years. And I just want to thank ahead of time each person who's here and who's going to testify. We really do value hearing from you. So I'm going to call 3 testifiers at a time, and then you can each tell us what we need to know. I'll remind you all to identify yourself and your school for the record. And also, we're kind of aiming for about 5 minutes each. If it's less than that, that's fine. If it's more, we'll have some grace, yes, but that's our general aim so that we can keep things moving and get to our other agenda items. So let's start with these 3. Superintendent Corey McIntyre, Superintendent Michael Thomas, and Superintendent David Law. And look at that, they're all ready to go here. So, and yeah, so we'll maybe start with Superintendent McIntyre, if you could introduce yourself for us and begin.
Well, thank you, Madam Chair Bennett, and members of the House Education Policy Committee. We're excited to be with you today. We can hardly contain ourselves, right? So, first, just want to say, in light of all the challenges we're facing, we want to say thank you for your service and for all you do for public education and the students of Minnesota. So I'm Corey McIntyre, Superintendent in Anoka-Hennepin Schools, sitting here with my predecessor right next to me here. So we have a lot in common. We are the state's largest district, and I'm here representing the 37,000 students, 8,000 staff in our 50 sites, and we serve about 250,000 residents in 13 communities, both in Anoka and Hennepin counties. If we don't have a handout for you, we'll get that to you. But our demographics, I'll just talk a little bit about, mirrors the state. So we are changing along with what you're seeing the state changes look like. 40% of our students qualify for education benefits. 10% are multilingual learners, and we have about 20% now, as many of the districts do, receiving special education services. My testimony, and what you'll hear from many of the others today, is how is your policy decisions really showing up in impact, mainly in the financial sense. And we, at our legislative platform, our board was really, and we have a unique situation in Anoka-Hennepin. We have co-chairs in our school board. We just renewed that for another year. So it's, we have the full political spectrum in our 13 communities, and we are advocating for a 5% increase. And I know that sounds a little unusual or unrealistic, but it's to make a point. And the point is that even with that, it still falls short of our deficit that we're facing. So I'll give you a little bit more of that story, and it helps us kind of give you a concrete example. In our last session, we did get 4 and 2 on the formula, and we were lucky to settle with our teachers at 5 and 3, nearly avoiding a teacher strike in the biggest district in the state by just a matter of days. And we knew immediately we were in a $20 million deficit because of that was more than what we had allocated in the last session. And as hard as we try to settle and do well by all 18 employee groups that we have and be as fair and competitive as we can, we had that deficit staring us in the face. So we moved right into the spring and made a $5 million budget cut last spring, eliminated 50 positions from our central office in phase 1, moved through phase 2 and reduced another 200 jobs. That was $14 million just at the central office to try to minimize impact at the schools. That's a third of our building that we have now made reductions to. And we really are just trying to make sure that we move forward with honoring our commitment to literacy, honoring our commitment to school safety, and to the student behavior in our workforce. So we made those changes, and what got us here, what you're going to hear a lot about, is a number of factors got us there. We're in a slight decline with enrollment. The federal pandemic relief funds expired. Those contract settlements were higher than the allocation from the state. The cost of business, right? The cost of operations is inflationary costs increasing dramatically. And we knew we wouldn't get any new revenue from the state or federal sources. So, and lastly, you hear the most about today is the mandates that came unfunded or underfunded. I'm going to spend most of my time on those. So, like I said, we made $14 million in cuts at the central office, and we still have $12 million to go, and that doesn't include what is still on the horizon with what we see as shortfalls in some key mandate areas. So we're really wanting to talk about mandate relief from a policy perspective that translates into a financial relief as well. So just to kind of start, and you've heard lots about special education and multilingual cross subsidies over the years. For us, that's about $40 million in Anoka-Hennepin, those two things alone. We've seen some recent proposals that would reduce special education transportation and non-public aid, and that would add $3 million more to that cross subsidy if that were to happen. We also really want to spend some time, and you're going to hear a lot about this today from other testifiers, the summer unemployment claims. Now, these haven't hit the district yet. I'm going to be really clear. We know that there's a pot of money that's being used, and we believe that that will be gone by next summer. So when that is gone, that means a $2.4 million cost to our district, along with paid leave estimate of $2.6 million. That's $5 million. So even if you added 2% onto the formula, that covers those two things, and that's it. That doesn't allow us to help, and we've already started talking about salary freezes are possible as we move into the next round of negotiations. Also, the READ Act you'll hear a lot about as well. We're probably in the neighborhood of $5 to $7 million short for not only training, but we are in our elementary literacy adoption right now, and the cost of the actual materials looks to be about $3 million more than we had anticipated, because those costs have gone up as well. Transportation contracts are coming in double digits, more like 20% or higher for most districts who are negotiating right now. And then you're going to hear a lot about the K-3 discipline statute too. And we hope that you can find a way to make some adjustments to that K-3 discipline statute, because for us, that is we had last year alone over 350 individual episodes where we've had to vacate a classroom, empty the classroom with the students because of a very dangerous or unregulated student. And so that's, 250 of those were at the elementary level and about 100 of those at the middle school level. We need time. Those suspension days, 1, 2, 3 days, give us time to bring the family in and come up with a better and a new plan on how to support a student versus a child coming back in class after a dangerous or maybe an injury occurring, and then back in class the next day with nothing new to work with. You're going to hear much more detail about that, but for us, we've also added $1.5 million just to support the staffing, training, and space needs to comply with that K-3 discipline statute. So that is another funding piece for us that we didn't have any dollars attached to make that happen. That's very fast. That's a high-level overview, but when you add those things up together with nothing changes, that's $50 million for our district that comes out of our general fund, and or puts our school board into a position of needing to go back to our voters, and they have told us, we'd love to help you, but we just can't do that right now. We're only halfway to the cap on the operating referendum, and we just know that the palette for our communities isn't there to take on more tax burden. So that's our story anyway. You're going to hear more about that from my colleagues. So I just want to end with saying thank you for your commitment to work with us. I know that funding is limited, and we're going to need to find other ways to solve some of these issues. But you first need to have the context around what those impacts are practically and financially on districts moving forward should nothing change. So again, thank you for your time, and I'll turn it over to my colleagues.
Thank you, Superintendent McIntyre. And just to note for committee members, that handout is in our folders that he referenced.
Thank you.
And we will go to Superintendent Thomas.
Thank you, Madam Chair Bennett and other members of the House Education Policy Committee. It's truly an honor to be here today. My name is Michael Thomas, and I am the proud superintendent with Prior Lake Savage Area School District. And we are a district just under 9,000 students, about 1,300 staff. in nearly 60 languages spoken throughout our district, and changing demographics and changing complexities of our district. I kind of affectionately share with our staff that we're no longer this little handshake lake community, that we actually are maybe not growing in terms of our numbers, but we're definitely maturing. And so our procedures, protocols, and how we do business in supporting our students and our staff and our broader community is getting much more challenging compared to maybe where we were years ago. And today, I'll just talk about a few items here, really kind of putting into perspective that first, understanding and really appreciating the dilemma that we're in, that we know there's not new money on the table, and that every public entity is vying for the same slices of the pie, if you will, and it's very finite. And that as proposals come forward, our biggest concern is that we are going to get additional mandates put into the conversation, and those mandates will come significantly under and or unfunded completely. And that is our biggest ask, is that we really find ways that we can mitigate that kind of add to the table, knowing that anything that we could repeal and or revise timelines would give us the ability equating to the dollars, because we don't want to do this work haphazardly. And I'll speak for our district and many of our staff. The READ Act alone, I feel like we are rushing to get this through, and I'm really concerned because we fully understand the intent and spirit of the READ Act, but we need to do it with fidelity. And to hurry up and do something like that when we know we have a war on literacy before us, that is not a wise decision. And so even slowing some of that would give us the reprieve to make sure that we're doing it properly. In Prior Lake Savage Area Schools, as you've heard my colleague Corey speak to, we are in an upside down situation where the revenues that we are getting are flat at best, if not declining, because our enrollment is flat and declining, and that's a bulk of our budget. But our expenses, the cost of doing business, is excessive. And so we might have a 2 to 5%, 2.5% revenue projections that we can forecast, where our expenses are hitting at about 5%. And then, as Madam Chair, you spoke to the 60-plus initiatives that were brought into the last session. Those come significantly underfunded, if not completely unfunded, and we have to balance between what is good for our students and what is good for our students. We're not sitting around in all these buckets of cash wondering how should we spend this for our kids. We really are trying to be great stewards of our public tax resources, and that's a real fine balance to us to be able to meet those mandates along with our general daily educational needs of our kids. And those needs are growing significantly. Back during COVID, a lot of our fund balances were ballooned up with a lot of the federal resources. And what we're seeing now, well beyond COVID, is that the types of regulations of behavior that you're going to hear about later on today is significant. And so our SPED referral numbers continually go up. And so people will ask, well, Michael, what happened to the SPED cross-subsidy aid? Well, our referrals are going through the roof, and so that cross-subsidy aid that we are getting is actually going towards a higher increase in our SPED referral rates, and so we want to find ways to bring greater balance to that. We also know that about 80% of our budget goes towards people. The people are the magic in all of our school systems. Math doesn't teach itself. Kids don't feed themselves. A great staff member is behind all those actions supporting our students, and we know that we need to take care of our staff. And it is becoming increasingly hard for our staff to willingly say, this is what I want to do, when we keep adding more and more to their plates by way of some of these mandates or things that we are rushed to meet deadlines to accomplish, and they know they're not doing it with integrity. And as educators, we don't do it for the fame and recognition. We do it for the integrity, for what is best for our kids. And if I don't feel I'm able to give that, I feel like I'm failing my students. And that's a hard place to put many of our educators. We talk a little bit about the funding piece. One of the pieces I know that was very helpful is that we finally tied the base funding formula to inflation. And just to put it into perspective, this is not something that we've been dealing with for the past year or 2 years. This is decades in the making. in Prior Lake Savage Area schools alone, had this funding formula been tied to inflation back in 2013-14 to date, last year alone, I would have had an additional $11 million of revenue in our operating budget. I wouldn't have had to go to my community asking for a levy of which they did not support because of what Corey was mentioning earlier. There's a total tax conversation that our families are having at the dinner table. It's not just about educational taxes, it's property taxes, it's park and rec, it's a lot of things. And so when I ask our community, are you supportive of our district? Their no vote, I don't equate that to mean they don't value education, they don't support the district. I know that I'm one of many conversations they need to have to balance their family budgets as well. And so that's something that I'm mindful of, which also brings us to some of the local optional revenue. And so districts like mine who don't have a large commercial tax base, and we have a lot of this falling on our homeowners, having some flexibility there and looking at that per pupil aid to address the delta that I'm facing, as well as the inability to, or the my need to put that onto my residences versus spreading that out through our commercials and enhancing that equalization factor, that would be a huge help to some of our smaller districts or mid-sized districts that are trying to balance those needs as well. And I'll just close with this because I know we've got a list of our colleagues that will be presenting to you. One large piece that I began to speak to earlier was around the READ Act. And so I'm very fortunate in our district that we have been able to negotiate, with our staff as well as with our board, having a supportive calendar that has built-in professional development days as well as some early release time. We're lucky to be able to have brought that training into the contract day. If I were not able to have that contract calendar structured the way it is, with the money that we received in our district, I would only be able to pay my teachers about $13 an hour for professional development to do it outside of the contract day, and then cross-subsidize the rest to bring them up to about that $50 range, which is their contracted PD rate. I don't have enough resources to do it. And so, again, I'm fully supportive of the READ Act. You're not going to hear anybody who says literacy is not important. But if it's that important, then we need to receive the support to be able to do that with fidelity and not have to continually rob from what's good for our kids to add to what's good for our kids. And that's a real challenge that we're finding ourselves in. And I know it's not just us that you're hearing from. I know many of our committees legislatively, you're going to hear from a lot of different entities, and I can appreciate the challenges that you face as locally elected officials representing your constituents, and we are just one of many. But collectively, I think you're going to hear today that we have very similar and shared interests. Find ways that we can temper the mandates, find ways that we can be great stewards and more efficient with our public tax dollars in our local levels. And we want to do this together and do this as a team with you all. So I thank you for your service, and thank you for hearing from many of our colleagues here today as you open up your session.
Thank you, Superintendent Thomas. And now we'll go on to Superintendent Law.
Chair Bennett, members of the committee, thanks for meeting with me this afternoon. I'm David Law, Superintendent from Minnetonka Public Schools. I just want to start with some level setting. Superintendent McIntyre, Superintendent Thomas, Superintendent Eric Melby from Bloomington, Superintendent Rhoda Mary Peary from Hopkins, Superintendent from St. Michael, and I went and listened to superintendents across the state in October, November, and December. We went to Redwood Falls, Laverne, we went to Erskine, Duluth, St. Cloud, Rochester. Unanimously, superintendents were saying, we are crushed under the weight of expectations and underfunding. This isn't a Metro issue. We went because there was a perception the Metro's thriving and the state is suffering. Our voice essentially is echoed in all of those sessions where 30 or 40 leaders gathered together to say, we can't do it. You're going to hear people talking about statutory operating debt. Nothing impacts community trust more than a system burdened to accomplish something unfunded, something as critical as public education, one of the few things in our Constitution that we're expected to do, piled with expectations and minimal funding. As leaders, we're constantly charged with, be like a business, just cut your costs. Well, we're here in the cost-cutting effort. Somehow you need to decide what's a priority. So the last session, 65 expectations, we funded food in public education. That's a community crisis. If children are hungry, it's in the community, that's a community crisis. I challenge whether or not that's an educational expense. We can deliver. In public education, we do deliver. The pandemic happened, we were essential, we stayed open, we delivered. There's a mental health crisis. You continually talk about how can we play a role in the mental health structure. We don't have doctors, we don't have emergency rooms, we're not open on weekends, but you continue to say, how can you solve our mental health crisis? You have to decide, what is it you want from us? I hear a lot about report cards. You want to measure report cards. 100% of our employees that applied in our district to get summer unemployment got it. 100%. We should get an A for that. 100% of our students that needed to be fed at school are being fed. 100% of our employees that are earned sick and safe time are going to earn that time. Are those the things you want to measure? Because that you've invested in us, and elected officials told the community, you've never given us more money. And then our employers turned around and said, hey, can we have some of that money? I said, well, it really is earmarked for food and summer unemployment and earned sick and safe time and coming up family leave. All of those things will have a cost on our system. And just a piece into the system, our HR people who are already overworked and Corey's system is cutting by a third, now have to manage multiple new expectations for when people apply for unemployment or sick and safe time and family medical leave. So the administration behind these things is costly. The READ Act, probably one of the more critical things. What the public expects that you would be doing first and foremost on our system received a fraction of the financial support. Or like in my district, our $700,000 was already in our literacy aid, and they said, I'm gonna just say, you said, elected officials said, take that money you're already spending and put it in another spot, which for us meant for the hundreds of students that were getting small group support and literacy, we had to stop that to fund staff development and eventually curriculum. We can do it. Nobody loves kids more than people in this room. But if you pile a lot of things on, the things you think we're doing won't be happening. So we will have to reprioritize. And my message is really, speaking to superintendents across the state, this isn't a Metro Greater Minnesota issue. This is a statewide issue of, we've asked the schools to do everything. We've given them the resources of about 10% of the cost, and now we're telling them how disappointed we are that they're not getting it done. Well, you get what you pay for. Look at where you're spending money, pick your priorities, and we'll deliver. But what you've asked us to do out of the last session, moving forward is a challenge. And the planning piece for instructional leaders who are thinking about the future, I have next year planned out already for everything I'm going to do. That doesn't leave much room for your new ideas because you gave us a bunch 2 years ago. So if you come up with a lot of new things this year, we're going to struggle more with our limited resource and our employees who are saying this is a lot to do in a short period of time. So as you go through with mandates this year, please think about, does this reflect on a limited budget the most important thing we can do moving forward? And in terms of resource, the biennium prior, the state budget was $52 billion. It's now $71 billion. It's hard to look at that and say, how did we not come out of that hole? We're cutting $5 million currently. Our next 5-year cuts are totaling $18 million. 100 employees don't work in my school district anymore as we're trying to do more. So I appreciate you thinking about this. Where are your priorities? Help us. Our community thinks it's in the classroom supporting kids learning. Thank you.
Thank you, Superintendent Law, and the rest of you. So the next ones up are Superintendent Jeff Drake, John Morstead, and Donna Friedman. And while they're coming up, I just want to say thank you to these three. I mean, this is really helpful. Looking forward to the rest as well. And when you get seated there, we will start with Superintendent Drake.
Madam Chair and esteemed committee members, my name is Jeff Drake. I'm the superintendent of Fergus Falls Public Schools, and I'm thankful for the opportunity to address you today. While we are appreciative of the efforts to strengthen Minnesota's labor force, recent legislation regarding unemployment eligibility, earned sick and safe time, and paid family leave present significant challenges to our already strained rural school budgets and negatively impacts our ability to adequately staff our schools. Expanded unemployment. One of the largest mandates in terms of fiscal liability is the unemployment coverage extended to school support staff. While the state set aside dedicated funding to initiate this program, it is crucial to identify sustainable, long-term funding for this program. Fergus Falls witnessed the number of employees filing for unemployment benefits increase last year, and we expect that to continue to increase this year as well. State funds covering expanded unemployment are projected to run out before the end of this summer, leaving school districts to pick up the costs of the program moving forward. We estimate this to be $240,000 a year. From Superintendent Jeff Lund of Marshall County Central Schools, the number of employees signing up for unemployment has effectively resulted in a 13% raise for school support staff. This increase is in addition to the raises we typically provide. The ability to claim unemployment benefits over the summer has also made finding employees to work non-certified but equally critical jobs much more challenging. This could mean shortages in food service, paraprofessional support for students attending summer programs, or negatively impact the simple act of keeping an office open and accessible to employees and the public. It has also created a challenge with staff members who draw summer unemployment only to submit their resignations right before the start of the new school year. This often leaves students short of critical support staff to start their new year. Furthermore, disputes regarding an employee's eligibility to collect unemployment after turning down a summer employment offer can damage the employer-employee relationship. Earned safe and sick time. Earned sick and safe time also carries additional employer costs, which we estimate to be $25,000 per year. This created additional work for an already small office staff and potentially reduces access to a depleted pool of substitute teachers. It's fairly common for schools to piecemeal classroom coverage. The result is a disjointed educational experience for our students. Please consider extending the short call substitute pilot and repealing the minimum $200 daily rate mandate. Paid family leave. When paid family leave takes effect in January of 2026, school districts will be required to contribute a minimum of 50% of the costs. For Fergus Falls, the payroll tax is expected to be $115,000 annually. It is our understanding that in conjunction with other provisions, a teacher could be gone for as many as 20 weeks. Given the substitute teacher shortage, we are extremely concerned about ongoing classroom coverage. Prior to the creation of these laws, we worked on these issues together locally through collective bargaining with our staff. Student support aid. Many rural districts struggle to use this aid because of the narrow restrictions and lack of available professionals. In addition, special ed districts report struggling to access these funds. Could there be greater flexibility to use student support personnel aid for any position supporting students? Could special ed districts be allowed to transfer their aid to other member districts? I've heard several of my colleagues express concerns that unfunded mandates and other legislative changes are going to push their districts towards SOD. Many districts, like Fergus Falls, try to make budgets work without the benefit of an operating levy. To make room for new expenses, we are forced to make reductions in other areas. Invariably, these cuts end up coming from people and programs, and the education of our students is weakened in the process. Viable solutions need to address revenue to match increased costs to employers, while also ensuring that benefits don't leave schools short of the staff necessary to provide a high-quality educational experience for all students. To achieve this, we need your continued support and understanding as we navigate these complex issues. Thank you for your time and your consideration.
Thank you, Superintendent Berg, very helpful. Kyle Christensen. Nope, sorry wrong one, Superintendent Drake, I'm sorry, I'm looking below on my list here. So now let's go to John Morstead, thank you. Sorry
Thank you,
about that.
Madam Chair, and members of the committee. I appreciate the opportunity to speak with you today. My name is John Morstead. I'm the Executive Director of Finance and Operations with Osseo Area Schools. Osseo is the 5th largest district of the state with about 21,000 students. I also currently serve as the president of the Minnesota Association of School Business Officials, or MASBO, representing 900-plus school business officials and support staff across the state. Well, many of my colleagues have talked about, and you're gonna hear a repetitive theme here about a number of things. I really want to focus my time on the administrative burden and how that piece is really affecting both business offices, HR departments, and the staff, especially as you get into smaller districts. That person many, many times is the same person, just wearing different hats. So I wanted to talk about a few of those particular items. And obviously, I'm going to bring up some of I'm a finance guy, so I'm going to bring up some of the financial implications, but really, I'm a big believer that we have to keep our eye on the ball, and we have to focus on keeping things simple. And I think we've lost sight of that in a lot of places. While intentions are good, impacts are very different from, I think, where the intentions started. So, on the issue of summer unemployment, again, I would call this a double-edged sword. I'm sure that the staff who are now eligible are very appreciative of that funding that they now get. However, the fund being used to pay for it is quickly running out. The first year was about $45 million was spent across the state in the summer of '23. The summer of '24, $58 million, leaving about $32 million going into this next summer. I think with an estimate of more like $60 million as what the expense is expected to be. So without changes today, districts have to pick up that difference. And that difference is only allowed to be picked up with our general fund. We can't put it anywhere else per laws today. In Osseo, we spent about $1.8 million last year on summer unemployment. And just to kind of give you a little bit of perspective, based on current formula, a 1% increase on the formula to us is about $1.7 million. So we lose 1% automatically simply on summer unemployment if we had to fund 100% of it. I understand we're not there yet, but that's what that looks like, not including family medical leave and the other pieces. Changes to the employee leave policies have also had a very detrimental impact on our schools. Earn sick and safe time with its changes. Number one, overrode all the collective bargaining agreements that we work very, very hard and with very long hours to try to find that agreement with all of our unions. And that was completely overridden. So that management discretion was taken out of our hands. The increase in cost, and both in cost and the administration needed to manage all the additional leave requests, I think has really taken us all a little aback and by storm. And there's one particular outlier I want to highlight just to give you an idea of what we face on a daily basis. So ESST created leave. So now as an example, a substitute teacher earns leave, which means, and we've seen this situation this year, we now have to find subs for our subs, which is frankly a little bit ridiculous. So we have substitute teachers, and if you think about that position, you're not required to fill in. You're volunteering. You're accepting a role. We either ask you or through a system, you go and say, yes, I will sub. And then you turn around immediately and say, just kidding, I'm going to take leave for that. So we have to go find another sub. So I just took 2 subs out of the system where we're already tight to fill that one thing, that one role, because of this particular law specifically. So again, very difficult for us. The overall, the staff that we have to add to be able to manage all this with all the differences, and also knowing that the family medical leave changes are coming. Again, it's creating an administrative burden. I know in my district, we're looking to add between 2 and 2.5 additional FTE just from a leave perspective from changes in '23 and '24's legislative sessions. We're struggling to provide consistent education to students when our teachers, educational support professionals, and support staff are not present on a consistent basis. We're also taking money out of the classroom to hire staff to manage, again, all these leave requirements. I'd also like the committee to look at removing some of the administrative burdens that are placed on schools that we might deem onerous or non-critical requirements that may even be outdated or just simply not needed or don't go anywhere, but what we have to meet requirements that are listed in state law in order to stay compliant. Some examples of those things are there's a transportation report that is very time consuming to complete, and there's maybe one of the 6 or 7 major pieces of that that actually has any effect on districts long term. Some other examples, there's an annual budget report that we have to publish every year. Health and safety reporting is actually done multiple times. We do it through the long-term facility maintenance process and also through a separate website. Same information, just gets put in 2 different places. Career and Tech Edge budget reporting that doesn't really have a long-term output or impact on any funding or any changes to the programs. And also allowing school districts to publish legal notices on websites instead of paying for it, where some districts today don't have to do that and all the rest of us do, especially when you think that that's just not how the public gets information anymore. They don't use newspapers. So are we being harmfully helpful in forcing this to be through a newspaper? Finally, to streamline and reduce how schools are required to track and report financial information can also help to cut into that growing administrative burden. I get to talk with lots of colleagues across the country in my role as the president of MASBO and with ASBO International. And Minnesota is renowned for the most complicated financial system of all school districts nationwide and even internationally when we start to bring in the partners from over there. To the detail we have to go to by requirements it's mind-boggling. I wish I could tell you how many lines of data we have in our budget. I think my district, it pushes 45,000 lines of data. It's just a crazy amount of money to keep track of. And my question is, what is that information being used for? There are some places where it's obviously very useful, but there's a whole lot where it's just being done to check a box or just to say, yep, I think somebody somewhere thought it was a good idea to know what instructional versus non-instructional software we're spending money on. So being able to break that down, because all these things ultimately increase cost, and that cost is administrative cost. And as I said to start when I mentioned keep your eye on the ball, well, administration is not the ball. The ball is the classroom. That is where the money needs to go. That is where we want the money to go, because that is where we see the impact. And to give you an idea, I looked back a little bit, and if you went back it takes, couple decades, let's say you go back 20 years, the average range for administrative costs for school districts was in about the 2 to 3% range. I pulled the information for fiscal 23. It's the last year that we have all the information readily available to us. Statewide average now is 4.9%. So we've theoretically doubled the cost of administration in 20 years. That dollar, now not straight, that's because our costs have gone up and funding hasn't quite followed it along with the additional mandates and requirements, but that is money directly out of a classroom. That is money that can be going to help students. As we've heard from other colleagues, student needs are going up. The money has to follow that. The money shouldn't be following administrative tasks. And so we would ask that you, if possible, please take the opportunity to try to reverse those administrative burdens. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Morstead. Ms. Friedman.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Madam Chair and committee members. My name is Donna Friedman. I'm the Director of Administration and Human Resources in the Forest Lake Area School District, which serves about 5,800 students, and we're located just on the northern edge of the metro area. Thank you for having me and my colleagues here today. Today, I'm here to testify to my district's experience with summer unemployment, so the UI, a little bit deeper dive on that, as has been discussed a little bit from my colleagues as well. This, of course, is now available to non-licensed school staff, support staff, who are scheduled to work fewer than 12 months. Our district has truly always had some difficulty with people giving late notice at the end of the summertime. It's August 28th, school's starting figuratively tomorrow, and we get a raft of notifications. Each year since 2022, we have seen that, in truth. In 2022, it was 43 people. In 2023, we went down. It was 34 people, but last year, we went back up to 41 late-term resignations. By that, I mean just at the end of the summer, maybe a handful of weeks into the school year. This time, though, this past year, 10 of those people had collected UI of about $15,000. In one case, she didn't tell us that she wasn't coming back. She just simply didn't show up. There were an additional 3 people who were deemed eligible, but we didn't see a bill associated with them. We can't be absolutely certain as to why. We think it's a reasonable conclusion to think that these 3 people have probably already started another job. We do not see an effect of summer UI assisting us with retaining employees. We do see that to protect their summer UI payments, employees are going to feel even more reluctant to give notice of their intent not to return until the start of the school year. Not uniquely, we do not have a raft of prospective workers just waiting to be hired. These late resignations mean at best admin staff have to channel their attention into last-minute hiring rather than preparing to welcome students. More likely, it means students just don't receive the appropriate service that they need and deserve because we're not fully staffed. As this past summer, 2024, arrived, we began daily to receive thick stacks of UI mailings requiring district response. A staff member had to devote at least 2, often up to 3 full workdays worth of time each week through the entire summertime and even a little bit after the summertime to responding to UI information requests. Each request requires a good 30 minutes probably to handle. The responder also has to contact other different people within the organization to gather information, so that places additional demands on their time as well. This responsibility is so time-consuming that we may need to devote additional resources that we would rather put towards student services in order to add a staff person to address the mountain of UI documents. Additionally, the availability of summer UIs has apparently impacted employees' willingness to, I'd term, test the waters at other times of the year. As we entered this January, so this month, we've received even more UI requests, information requests, due to employees applying for UI over the winter break, which lasted about a week and a half. I've even heard from other districts who have experienced UI applications for the 2 to 3 day MEA break. Each of these requests has to be fully responded to in a timely fashion, which requires already scarce staff time. Our district does have a concern as well over the potential long-term cost effect of UI, as has been discussed a little briefly. In 2023, 120 employees received the summer UI at a cost of about $214,000. Last year, 2024, 139 employees received summer UI, and the cost went up to $252,000. Recall that 10 of those got about $15,000, didn't come back. Many employees are still not aware of this possibility or have thus far chosen not to apply, but the number of employees applying is increasing, as is the cost. If the resources the state allocates on a year-to-year basis to cover UI commitments is not enough to do so, the cost liability will fall to districts. In Forest Lake area schools, if we had to cover the cost of last summer's UI, we'd have to cut about 4 teachers. Does it have to be teachers? Well, the backdrop of my district. We have less advantageous funding than many of our immediate neighbors. We have a minimal fund balance. We have barely sufficient administrative support to get done what we need to get done. And we have a resultant universal disfavorable salary comparison. we would probably need to eliminate about 4 staff members whose primary professional purpose is to directly serve our students' needs, so that employees who knowingly applied for and accepted a part-year position, many of whom do not desire to work in the summertime for their own reasons and bypass options for full-year jobs, so that those folks are able to collect the UI in the summer. In summation, in reviewing the lists of employees who have applied for and received summer UI, we've noted the strong majority are people who have been employed for the district for a substantial number of years. We do not discern that this provision is assisting us in retaining staff members. Conversely, this provision stands to potentially cause us to reduce services available to students, as well as to further limit our ability to apply resources to the salary and benefit structures that actually would help us in our drive to attract and retain staff. This concludes my testimony. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Ms. Friedman. The next two, we're going to go 2 up this time, Superintendent Jason Berg and Kyle Christensen. And when they get up there, we'll start with Superintendent Berg, if we could.
Actually, Chair Christensen's going to go first. Is that okay?
That is absolutely fine. Yep.
Thank you. Whew. It'd been really weird if I had to go first.
Here you go.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon, Chair Bennett, committee members. My name is Kyle Christensen. I'm currently chair of the school board for Farmington Area Public Schools, ISD 192. This is Jason Burke. He's our superintendent. Since at least 2022, many of us have been asking the legislature to help stabilize public education funding. We proposed a simple solution. Use a portion of the large surpluses predicted just a couple of years ago to cover the costs of state and federal mandates for special education and multi-language learners. We explained doing so would ensure these students' needs are met. It would also free up hundreds of millions of dollars for local communities to invest in student achievement, as well as to improve pay and benefits for teachers and staff. To our disappointment, and to all of your understanding, we didn't get that simple solution, not in 2022 when there actually was a bipartisan solution on the table before the session ended, and not in 2023 when it would have been an easy win for everybody. Let me tell you a little bit about Farmington Schools, and thank you, Representative Roach, for being here. We appreciate your service to our community. Our district serves about 6,500 students and employs over 900 teachers, paraprofessionals, custodians, nurses, and others. ISD 192 is the largest employer in Farmington, a growing suburb about 30 minutes south of here. Our students come from Lakeville, Empire, and other surrounding townships and communities. Our district budget, like many others, is supported by a local operating levy. That means members of our community agreed to higher property taxes to fund small class sizes and other investments in student programs. Our levy generates about $5 million annually right now, and what it affords us is becoming less and less as the revenue is increasingly eaten up by cross subsidies. That's the costs that come out of the general fund to cover the state and federal mandates for special education and MLL that neither state nor federal government properly funds. In fiscal year 2023, our cross subsidy was about $7.5 million. In 2023, the legislature tried to help. Education bills enacted that year did increase funding for special education and MLL. That actually shrunk our cross subsidy to about $6 million, but there's a rub. The same session saw legislature passed that created a new wave of mandates that the legislature didn't have the ability or the political will to fully fund fully or permanently. Here's a simple sample of what those underfunded mandates cost our district. The READ Act, which is a vital investment in literacy, we estimate will cost at least $335,000 in ongoing annual costs for professional development and curriculum subscriptions. Paid family medical leave will be very helpful to many, but it will cost ISD 192 $432,000 annually in payroll taxes, plus an untold amount to hire substitutes for employees who utilize the benefit. Expanded unemployment insurance to pay hourly workers during non-student contact months will cost around $280,000 a year, and new employee safe and sick time benefits another $50,000. There's actually more. That's not an exhaustive list, but I think you get the point. Just those 4 new mandates cost our district $1.1 million. Add inflation, higher wages, health benefits costs, and you quickly find that even with different changes in the funding formula, we're still sliding backwards, despite historic investments in public education. I wish I could say that nobody saw this coming, but we've been surrounding these alarms for years. We've also gone to our voters twice now and failed to increase our operating levy. It's not that members of our community are opposed to public education. They're just struggling at home with higher taxes and inflation too. Frankly, they also wonder where the money went. Governor Walz said he would fully fund public education, and he even went on tour that summer touting historic investments and historic spending in public schools. He just forgot to mention all the new costs he imposed on the system. So right now, we're working on our 2025-2026 budget, and it means 5 years of budget realignments. And I like to joke that Jason calls that realignments, but in the business world, you just call that budget reductions and cuts. Sometimes there's shifting money for that in different things you do from a budgeting standpoint, but honestly, that's the net result. In prior years, we increased class sizes, we cut administrators and support staff, we right-sized classroom staff to enrollment, and reduced supports for gifted and talented programs, among other things. And we still face a $4.4 million deficit next year. That's about 4%, 5% of our budget. To close it, we'll raise fees. We'll also cut deeply into career and technical education. We'll reduce middle school electives and other supports that we're still working out the details. We're fortunate to have some reserve funds to help close the remainder of the gap, but we've nibbled around the edges long enough now that we really need structural changes in order to make our school district financing sustainable. Every Minnesota Vikings fan knows that the season begins with hope that this is our year. I'm sure that someday that'll be true. Right now, we need this session to be the one where legislators finally hear the urgency of our situation. We're grateful for the revenue, but we could really do without the restrictions on the time, place, and purpose it's spent. Can you help make this our year? Thank you for giving us this opportunity to testify today, and thank you for all you do to make Minnesota a better place. And I know Superintendent may have some suggestions for specific areas to focus on.
Thank you, Mr. Christensen. Superintendent Berg.
So I'm Jason Berg, Superintendent of Farmington Area Public Schools, and I've testified at a number of hearings before, and I understand the perception of we ask for things but don't provide solutions. So I'm going to share some thoughts about how we could maybe do some things, knowing that the state financial forecast is a little bit different than it was a couple of years ago. I would like to start, if we're thinking about continued investment, the READ Act has been impactful in our district, and we want to make sure that we're able to sustain that beyond last year's work, this year's work, and the work coming towards us. And as Chair Christensen talked about, we need to think about how we're going to continue to do that ongoing professional development, and that's boots on the ground. We need people to continue to support our staff in their professional learning. We also need to think about new staff that we hire. Unfortunately, this type of training has not filtered down to the teacher prep programs, or if we get people out of state. So it's going to be a continued cost to support staff in acquiring that knowledge. We'd also like to consider continuing to buy down the special education cross-subsidy. I'm sure if you look at different districts, our special education population and costs continue to rise. Just to put that in perspective, in our district in 2015-16, we had 10 level 3 center-based classrooms. We now have 30. When you think about a center-based classroom, it's a small number of students supported by probably 2 teachers and a handful of paraprofessionals. The needs that we're seeing in our kids continue to increase, and those are one of those costs that we really can't do anything with. When a student qualifies for an IEP, we want to, and we're mandated by law to implement whatever that is. So those are 2 areas we would ask to continue to look at an investment. When we talk about unemployment insurance, we know that the governor set aside some money to maybe get us through another summer. One of 2 things needs to happen. There either needs to be a sustainable funding stream from the state, or we need to be exempted. One of our biggest concerns is that's an easy one to look at and say, guess what, school districts, you can now levy that. And all we do is pass on that mandate and that cost onto our taxpayers. So if something can't be done, we would certainly ask that you don't add that to the levy and force us as districts just to add that on to our taxpayers. As you want to be a superintendent? As Chair Christensen shared, we've already have a hard enough time passing the last two levies that we've had. Paid family medical leave, we would ask for an exemption. We already have avenues for our staff to do that. And like a lot of programs, it was started out as 0.7% payroll tax, and it's already pushing 1%. It's going to be more expensive than what we're currently projecting. ESST, we would ask for the same exemption as the building and construction employees have. They are allowed to bargain that and negotiate those accrual limits. We would like to be able to do that as well. We would ask for continued flexibility in out-of-field permissions. We have a tough time filling certain positions, and those out-of-field permissions are essential to get qualified, good adults working with our kids. We'd also ask for the exemption of the limit of 5 in a lifetime. We would want and ask to expand the allowable uses for funding that is coming into our district. We have a lot of funding streams that come in. Some are restricted, and we're only allowed to use them in areas that, to be frank, we don't really need to use it. We could use that money more effectively elsewhere. And on the other side of it, we certainly don't want unrestricted funds that are coming in, like literacy aid used to be, and now it becomes restricted and can only be used for certain things. That's just robbing Peter to pay Paul. We were already using that in our district, and now we have to use general funds from something else to use that. So now we're saying, well, you are getting money for READ Act. It's just the same money. It's just getting parsed out differently. And then last thing is, we would ask for and advocate for the certification of educational benefits, Comp Ed, to continue to be through direct certification and the paper form. I know there's some conversation around going just to direct certification. In our district, 15% of our families still qualify for those educational benefits through the paper form. That's twofold. That's benefits that our families wouldn't be getting, and we do lose compensatory dollars that way, which would be about $250,000. So thank you for taking some of our suggestions and possibly putting those into your conversations as you move forward.
Thank you, Superintendent Berg. Next up, we have Lisa Carlson and Patrick Glynn. Hopefully I pronounced that correctly, Patrick. And after you get situated there, if we could start with Lisa Carlson.
All right. Good afternoon, Chair Bennett and members of the Education Policy Committee. My name is Lisa Carlson, and I've had the privilege of serving at Woodland Elementary in Eagan, Minnesota for 19 years as their principal. I also have the honor of representing Minnesota's elementary principals as the president of the Minnesota Elementary School Principals Association. Today I'm here to speak with a unified voice along with other education organizations, asking you to amend the non-exclusionary discipline policy that prohibits suspensions of students in grades K through 3. As elementary principals, we chose this work because we love children and we want to do best for all of them. But this policy has stripped us of the ability to make the best decisions for the safety and well-being of our students and staff. The safety of every student and staff member is my #1 priority. The children we serve today face increasingly complex mental health challenges, and when a young student becomes dysregulated, it's not only disruptive, but it's dangerous. One child's behavior can take away the safety and the learning of the other 25 children in the classroom and the adults who are trying to teach. Parents frequently call me distraught because their children are afraid to come to school. They share that their children are having nightmares, experiencing panic attacks, and crying at home about the chaos they witness at school. These parents want answers, but due to confidentiality, I cannot discuss what I'm doing to support the dysregulated student. They feel helpless, and as their principal, it's heartbreaking to hear the fear and frustration in their voices. In these situations, we implement every possible intervention: skills groups, sensory areas, movement breaks, restorative practices, and reteaching of expectations. But sometimes these supports are not enough. And when a child remains in the classroom after repeated incidents, It sends the message to their peers that the behavior is acceptable. It erodes their sense of safety and trust in their school. In my school, when a child becomes dysregulated, we must often clear the classroom. Imagine the lost learning of the other students. They're missing instruction, coping with heightened anxiety, and dealing with the fear that the classroom may not be a safe place for them. It's only a matter of time before a lawsuit arises over this lost learning. Parents have a right to expect that their children's education will not be disrupted daily by violent or destructive behavior. If the non-exclusionary discipline policy continues in its current form, it will place schools in an impossible legal and ethical position. This policy has also placed immense strain on teachers and staff. Teachers feel unsupported when their classrooms are repeatedly disrupted and they are left to manage situations far beyond what they've been trained to handle. Schools do not have the staff or the mental health resources to implement non-exclusionary discipline as it's written. It is, like so many other mandates, an unfunded expectation. As principals, we know that suspension is our last resort, but it has to remain an option. A short suspension allows schools the time to regroup, plan, and involve parents in a meaningful way. It also communicates to all students and families that safety is a priority and that there are consequences for harmful behavior. When families partner with schools, we can create effective plans to help children regulate and succeed. But when families refuse to engage, the current policy leaves us powerless to ensure a safe and supportive learning environment. Members of this committee, I urge you to amend the statute to allow for K-3 suspensions of up to 3 days when necessary. Continue monitoring the suspension data through the Minnesota Department of Education to ensure accountability, but don't punish all the schools for the actions of a few. This change is essential to protect the safety and emotional well-being and learning of all students. Without it, you risk not only further damaging the trust that families place in their schools, but also legal challenges from families whose children are being denied their right to a safe and effective education. On behalf of Minnesota's principals and the children and families that we serve, we ask you to trust us to make the best decisions for our schools. We must be able to address these challenges in ways that ensure safety, foster learning, and provide every child with an opportunity to thrive. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Carlson. And Mr. Glenn, am I pronouncing your name correctly?
Yeah.
Good, thank you.
Chair Bennett and members of the House Education Policy Committee, my name is Patrick Glynn, and I proudly serve as principal of Jeffers Pond Elementary School in the Prior Lake Savage area schools. I, too, support a unified voice to amend the non-exclusionary discipline policy that prohibits suspensions of students in grades K through 3. Safety is the highest priority at all of our schools. The reality is that highly dysregulated students exist in the fabric of our school communities too. While many of these students have special needs, others do not. Some are in grades K through 3, and they sometimes cause harm at school and jeopardize school safety. In my 20 years as an elementary principal, I have used suspension minimally and with success. Immediate separation is sometimes necessary to restore school safety and allow for healing. The separation provides the gift of time to create thoughtful and effective re-entry plans, ensuring that the return of a dysregulated student to the classroom is constructive, supported, and successful. Re-entry plans often involve complex logistics, such as a schedule adjustment, reallocating staff, and even modifying teaching spaces. These steps take careful planning and implementation, requiring collaboration among multiple staff members to debrief the crisis, analyze the situation, and make the necessary adjustments to support both the student and the broader school community. This all takes time. Secondly, victims of harm need to feel safe again. Seeing the student who harmed them back in the classroom the next morning undermines their sense of security and trust in the school environment. Safety is ensured when adults take action. Also, parents of victims are often upset and confused when no immediate consequences are evident. They question the principal's decision to allow the student to return so quickly. When restrictive procedures are necessary, allowing trained staff to physically intervene to protect themselves or others during moments of aggression, these situations can be deeply traumatic for everyone involved. Distance of space and time for both the student and staff is healthy and appropriate. Suspensions provide that time, and we should not be teaching children that it is okay to immediately return to the environments where they have hurt others. Over the past 5 years at my current school, I have overseen a total of 14 suspensions, 5 in-school suspensions and 9 out-of-school suspensions. Of the 9 out-of-school cases, 7 involved students in the grades K through 3, all of whom were receiving special education services. These suspensions were necessary due to incidents of repeated behavior, often involving multiple episodes of aggression against adults or other students within the same day. Each of the 7 students received a half-day or a full day of suspension, providing the time needed to develop and implement adjusted plans for their successful return to school. Re-entry conferences were held with the students and their families, creating an opportunity for everyone to come together and reaffirmed shared expectations. These meetings emphasized a collective commitment to maintaining a safe, nonviolent school environment and addressed any necessary changes to the students' schedules or the supports. These measures ensured that the student, their family, and the school were aligned in preventing future harm and promoting a positive school experience. The current statute allows for expulsion, but prohibits suspension, leaving no middle ground. As principals, we do not want to expel young students. Expulsion is not the answer. What we need is the ability to implement a short suspension, up to 3 days, when necessary. This balanced approach would allow us to address incidents thoughtfully while ensuring the safety and well-being of everybody in the school community. Members of this committee, no principal wants to suspend a student, but my colleagues and I have found it successful to ensure school safety and to have the time to make purposeful and important changes to help all students be successful. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Glenn. And last up, we have Aaron Nelson, Dr. Eric Nelson, and Superintendent Renee Case Ebenson. And when you are there, if we could start with Aaron Nelson, please.
Well, thank you, Chair Bennett and members of the committee. Aaron Nelson from Pequot Lake Schools, and it's my privilege to be here to represent our not only Pequot community, but principals in Greater Minnesota to talk about post-secondary enrollment options. As a principal with 25 years of experience in rural education, I'm proud of the work our schools do to prepare our students for post-secondary success. However, the rapid expansion of PSEO presents 3 significant challenges that I want to discuss today: financial strain, erosion of academic rigor, and high school struggles to compete in the college credit marketplace. Financial challenges. Minnesota's current PSEO funding model places immense financial pressure on high schools in my district and 3 neighboring ones, representing approximately 1,645 students in grades 9 through 12. PSEO participation has risen sharply from 182 students in the fall of 2022 to 232 students in the fall of 2024, with projections of over 250 students in the spring of 2025. This represents over 15% of our student populations. The growth has resulted in a $500,000 financial obligation for just 1 semester of PSEO courses. When students enroll in PSEO, the associated funding follows them, leaving high schools to manage fixed staffing and operational costs with reduced budgets. Additionally, students who fail or withdraw from PSEO courses often return to their high schools for remedial instruction, which we must provide without additional resources. This creates a financial imbalance as high schools bear the cost of these services while losing funding to PSEO programs. In response to academic rigor and accountability, while PSEO offers valuable opportunities for our students, its lack of consistent quality assurance is troubling. High schools are held accountable for state standards in preparing students for future success, but colleges offering PSEO are not measured by the same outcome goals. As a result, many students choose PSEO options based on perceived ease or flexibility rather than academic relevance or rigor. The rise of credit grabbing, where students prioritize accumulating free credits without considering alignment with degree pathways or academic goals, undermines efforts of high schools and colleges to guide students towards meaningful, structured post-secondary preparation. Both institutions strive to encourage thoughtful course selection through options like College in the Schools, or CIS options, but current PSEO system often incentivizes convenience over quality. The disadvantage of high schools to compete. High schools face significant challenges in competing with the flexibility and financial appeal of PSEO. Online PSEO courses offer scheduling freedom and no-cost credits, making them highly attractive to our students. Meanwhile, high schools must invest heavily to provide high-quality alternatives like CIS. College in the Schools programs require substantial resources, including subsidizing advanced education for teachers to meet strict qualifications, their master's plus 18 credits in a specific content area. And despite these investments, students often opt for PSEO due to its perceived ease, leaving schools struggling to maintain enrollment in our CIS courses. Late PSEO enrollments exacerbate this problem, destabilizing our CIS programs by leaving courses under-enrolled and financially unsustainable. This creates a vicious cycle where high schools cannot effectively compete in the college credit marketplace, limiting our ability to offer rigorous, locally controlled options. I come with problems, but I also have some potential solutions that I think I'd like to share today. I would ask that the committee consider supporting high school, College in the Schools consortia. High schools should be allowed to collaborate through CIS consortiums to pool resources and share certified instructors, enabling broader course offerings at a reduced cost. This model would stabilize CIS enrollment, help our rural schools sustain programs, and state grants such as the Minnesota Concurrent Enrollment Grant could be used to incentivize the development of these collaborative efforts. My understanding is that the current concurrent enrollment grant has not been accessed. So those funds could be used to help to support these consortia. Restructuring PSEO funding, the current funding model unfairly shifts financial burdens onto high schools. To address this, PSEO per credit cost should be capped to ease pressure on districts. Additionally, funding should be prorated for students who transfer, withdraw, or fail PSEO courses, ensuring that high schools are not left covering unfunded expenses. And finally, implementing some PSEO guidelines, such as eligibility for PSEO, to be refined to improve student success. Participation should be limited to 11th and 12th graders. Thresholds like ACT scores, AccuPlacer results, or counselor recommendations should ensure students are prepared for college-level work. To encourage thoughtful credit planning, students should be incentivized to enroll in rigorous CIS, College in the Schools options offered by their high schools. I believe these solutions will balance equity and quality and financial sustainability for our schools and students alike, and I thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Nelson. And now we have Dr. Nelson.
Madam Chair and members of the committee, I want to thank you for allowing me to testify this afternoon on this important topic. I will also be speaking to PSEO. My name is Dr. Eric Nelson, and I proudly serve as principal at Chatfield Secondary School. I am also the president of the Minnesota Association of Secondary School Principals Southeast Division. I've been an educator for 30 years, 23 of those as a principal, and have seen PSEO develop over the course of 3 decades. I've been a big fan of PSEO because it provided college opportunities for qualified students at no cost to the students or their families. Over the past 4 years, however, I've been disappointed with the direction that PSEO is headed. Without needed adjustments, this important program risks losing its integrity and position as a great option for our qualified students. Right now, I feel PSEO is a bit like the wild, wild west. There are so many opportunities, but also a significant number of dangers. According to a 2023 MDE report to the legislature, PSEO enrollment rose 6% coming out of the pandemic. Those numbers have skyrocketed over the past 2 years. 96% of my colleagues in Southeast Minnesota replied that in a recent survey that their district saw significant growth in PSEO participation over the past 2 years. As participation has grown, unfortunately, admission standards have decreased. In the past, PSEO was aimed at providing additional high-rigor opportunities for our top-performing students. Now, particularly since the explosion of online learning, the admissions criteria have dropped. 87% of my colleagues that responded to a survey indicated that they have seen students engaged in PSEO despite being a poor fit for college at this time. A colleague from a small southeast Minnesota school shared with me that 3 of his students that were cautioned about not being ready for college insisted on continuing with PSEO and failed their courses. Another reported a student failing 29 credits worth of college classes over the course of 2 terms. I've also seen students that we've tried to counsel out of participating struggle in PSEO. This will continue until the guardrails are strengthened and admissions requirements are made more rigorous. Unfortunately, high schools also get no information about student performance until grades are finalized and reported to us. We don't learn about trouble until it's too late. Failing students come back to us with a need for credit recovery. They end up ineligible for their Minnesota State High School League activities. They have a sour taste in their mouth about college, and they list a poor grade on their college transcript that will limit their opportunity for future school choices. That's not how we want to operate. I cannot quantify rigor. However, there's clearly a narrative among high schoolers right now that PSEO and particularly online options are much easier than the courses offered at their home high schools. This has led to a significant decline in options for high rigor courses back at those home high schools. In the last few years, I've had to cancel upper level Spanish, calculus, college chemistry, college physics courses because there were not enough students to make those courses viable. When we register for them, I'm running them. And then PSEO registration occurs and I lose all those students. My kids that are high-level kids that want to stay at their home high school are having their opportunity stripped away from them. The growth of PSEO courses has been particularly harmful to small rural schools like mine. If you only have 60 seniors and you have 20 of them go PSEO, you can imagine what that does to my enrollment and my opportunities to offer electives and things like that. It's really, really harmful to the smaller schools. Students are not afraid to share that those classes are much easier than the classes taught in our building. Again, I can't quantify rigor, but I can say that seeking the path of least resistance is a sad approach to learning. I fear that PSEO graduates will face greater resistance from future schools if the academic integrity of PSEO offerings are not shored up. Finally, when students choose PSEO, their high school has already accounted for them in staffing and master schedule building. The October deadline for spring semester enrollment that was put in place by the legislature last year has been a disaster for our schools already this year. We've created our staffing plans back in spring, and now all of a sudden we're having a huge number of students that are bailing on us and taking classes in the next coming months. The loss of revenues due to PSEO occurs way after districts have already adopted their budgets for the year. I ask you to consider the following. Include principals and high school counselors in the process of standardizing and rewriting the minimum admissions requirements for PSEO participation. Maintain full pupil funding to home schools and then charge us a reasonable flat per credit rate for the district's students that are going to PSEO courses. Limit full-time PSEO students' credits to 30 in a calendar year. Part-time PSEO students' combined school and college credits should be limited to an amount equal to a full-time high school load. We should not be overloading our credits on students that we have not seen demonstrate the ability to manage that. And then finally, require colleges to provide status updates to their home schools at least twice during an academic term so that the home high school can provide needed intervention and maintain its responsibility of verifying high school league eligibility and to be prepared to do remediation if the student is not successful. Thank you for your time this afternoon.
Thank you, Dr. Nelson. And Superintendent, is it Evanson or Evenson?
Evenson.
Evenson. I knew somebody with that name once, so I was thinking that was it. I understand you may have a teacher from your district in the room.
I do.
And that teacher is
I'll
very
yield my
welcome.
spot if it's okay.
Thank you. Yep, very welcome to come to the table, so.
Thank you.
Yes, and if she'd like to speak as well, that's fine too. So Superintendent Evenson.
Well, good afternoon, Madam Chair and committee members. My name is Renee K. Stevenson, and I proudly serve as the superintendent for Jordan Public Schools. With me today is Sarah Sievers, a high school special education teacher and our current Ed Minnesota Jordan president. I want to start by sharing my appreciation of the reflectiveness of this committee in seeking impact on the recent legislation for school districts. As an educational leader, I recognize that we can have the most positive intent and sometimes the impact lands somewhere that we didn't expect it to. In that spirit of advocacy and reflectiveness, I am here to share our local education perspective. Jordan Public Schools serves approximately 1,800 students. We are one of the few districts that do not have a local operating levy. We rank 301 out of 328 districts in revenue ranking. Despite that, we have prioritized and maintained a balanced budget, making reductions as needed. We are fiscally responsible and we are extremely intentional with the use of our tax dollars, which means we run very lean operating and staffing. All of this considered, like many others, we already see budget shortfalls from legislation that is having an unintended impact. And I could actually speak to 65 plus mandates that have had an impact, but I will narrow that to 3 today. First, I'm excited to have legislation in relation to the science of reading. As a former curriculum instruction assessment coordinator for Anoka-Hennepin School District, I cannot express how important the READ Act legislation is. I greatly appreciate the initial funding provided to support implementation. Jordan's implementation is taking place over the course of 2 years in alignment with requirements. We received an allocation of $65,000 in one-time funding for our training. Our one-year costs exceeded that amount, and we estimate exceeding our initial training allocation by nearly $60,000 by the end of year 2. This cost is in alignment with locally negotiated contracts for duty outside of the staff's contracted time. We are concerned with unfunded ongoing training needs as we hire new staff that are untrained, because there remains some uncertainty with how this will play out in higher ed. We were intentional to prioritize pre-existing professional development days for our training, but it cannot be solely completed within that allotted time effectively. Teachers have reported the added pressure of this important work. The need for time outside of school for our staff, some already involved in master's programs, some having small children, others having second jobs or coaching within our district. To require something that can't solely fit within the confines of the school calendar has proven difficult. We ask for greater flexibility in implementation timelines and continued funding with less restrictions to ensure that our staff can be trained and fairly compensated for their time. Second, one of the most impactful financial challenges has been in relation to the summer unemployment benefits. Historically, Jordan Public Schools would levy an average of $0 to $5,000 per year, not including the pandemic year and years that we've had budget reductions. In the past 2 years alone, Jordan Public Schools has spent approximately $91,000 in year 1 and $150,000 in year 2. And we are very aware that the short-term funding will likely run out this year, and we're very concerned about the impact to our local budget. These funds cannot be levied, so this must come from our general fund when the short-term funding sunsets. For reference, the added cost just last summer equates to the cost of 2 teachers. There is an additional impact on central office time needed for our one human resources staff member. Summer programs that support much-needed literacy, math, and social-emotional extended learning have already been challenging to fill with staff. This legislation has only added to those challenges and hinders our ability for a district like Jordan to offer the programming we would like for our students. As a school district, our wages are very competitive, but our funding stream is not flexible enough to support the ongoing challenges such as this. We would request consideration that pre-K-12 school districts be fully funded or exempted from this legislation. The last thing that I would like to note, though we are not yet at the stage of implementation, I would like to call your attention to concerns regarding the impact of paid family medical leave to school districts. As you are likely aware, school districts already have supportive leave options in place for staff. This added layer brings both concerns and many unknowns, with an immediate tax impact to our employees and unfunded costs to the employers, impact to locally negotiated contracts, impact to central office, knowing we don't have the budget to mitigate added accounting responsibilities with added staff. In the past 3 years, we've seen an increase of more than 800 budget codes. We also worry about the shortage of licensed subs available and unintended impact to our students and school operations with the potential of 20-week leaves. We would request more specificity in the legislation and full funding for schools to impact the paid family medical leave. Finally, whether you call the new legislation educational mandates or educational opportunities, the impact is the same, especially for a district like Jordan that doesn't have a local operating levy. We request long-term funding mechanisms in place for new legislation or repeal as needed. Additionally, please trust our locally elected school boards to govern and partner with school officials to prioritize their budgets and make educational decisions based on the needs of their students and staff and school community. Thank you so much for your time and reflection.
Thank you, Superintendent Evenson. And Ms. Sievers, would you like to add some things?
I was just here in support.
Excuse
I'm
me,
one
Ms.
of the few-
Sievers, could you just state your name?
Yep, I'm
and
Sarah
title?
Sievers, and I am a high school teacher. I'm actually a special ed teacher, so I am part of the READ Act, as well as I am our union president. So I'm here on behalf just to support kids. And I tell you what, it's been a pleasure today because all of our educational leaders, whether it's you guys right there, whether it's our superintendents, whether it's curriculum leaders, we all want what's best for kids. And I just hope that today and going through this session, you guys are listening to all of us and coming up with the best solutions so that teachers have what they need, students get what they need, and at the end of the day, I just really want to say thank you for the opportunity, but working with these kids is pretty special. So I just don't want to fry any of my good staff. And as a union leader, I'm getting a lot of pushback, and I don't want to lose any of them. They're amazing. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Ms. Sievers. And it can be very stressful on teachers when all these new initiatives are dumped at the same time and on superintendents, principals, and thank you to everybody who came. All the school officials here. That was very, very helpful. And I know your schedules are busy, so we appreciate you taking the time to come to the Capitol and share these things. I really want to, I was just saying we need to clip this and put it online so people can listen to all these wonderful testimonies, because we do need to listen. You're right. And I heard, briefly, I know we need to move on here, but one of the testifiers used the word harmfully helpful. And that is, excuse me, that is right on. It's sometimes called unintended consequences too. As a former teacher, I know when I would try to help my students or when parents try to help their children, you can sometimes hurt those people by doing that or the way you do it. So we need to really be cognizant of that as legislators in how we enact these things. So I really appreciate all this input. So the next thing that we're going to do is turn our attention to the next item on our agenda, which is House File 6. And I'm going to move to the testifier table along with Representative Mueller and Representative Bakeberg, who I believe is in the room. We have about, 15 minutes left, I think? So we can at least get started, and I'll move right now. And Representative Lawrence is going to come up.
Are we going to give him a time limit? Yes. Tell the chair she has 2 minutes. Yep. Thank you, Madam Chair. After everyone is seated, please introduce yourself for the record and make your motion.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Love calling you that. I'm Representative Peggy Bennett from District 23A, and I move House File 6 before the committee with the intention that the bill be laid over for possible inclusion in an omnibus bill or further action at a later date.
Madam Chair, would you proceed with your presentation?
I will, thank you very much. So House File 6 covers several of the education priorities of the House Republican Caucus for education. And throughout the bill, we make it clear that literacy is learning, that local control is innovation, and empowered parents are engaged parents. This bill is divided into 3 articles and are presented here together. And I just want to emphasize here that as the chair, I do intend to take the separate components in this bill and have them brought forward as individual legislation. I'm not a big fan of omnibus bills, but this is a great way to get our message out, so we will present it in this way. So starting with, I'm just going to give a quick overview, and I've brought some expertise here at the table with me. Article 1, we focus on our commitment to foundational literacy skills, which we heard a lot about from the testifiers. Literacy skills for reading instruction delivered through the science of reading. And Representative Mueller, who's been a leader in our caucus on literacy, reading instruction, and the science of reading, will be talking more about this in a moment. So I'll just go on. Article 2, we focus on empowering parents with information and promoting education innovation through local control and flexibility. And eventually here, Representative Bakeberg will, with his real-life experience as both a teacher and a current administrator, he will be walking us through Article 2. In Article 3, we provide flexibility for school boards in both funding and relief from the more than 65 new mandates imposed on our schools in the previous biennium. And I'm going to touch on that part right now, so we're going to flip around a little bit. So we'll start with Article 3. And that one, as I mentioned, provides flexibility for funding and mandates. We have flexible funding for schools throughout fiscal year 2029, which would be the 2028-29 school year. And what this bill does, under this section, school boards would be allowed to transfer any funds that are not otherwise encumbered or limited by federal law, so long as that transfer does not inadvertently trigger additional state aid or local levy. And I heard a lot of testimony of, hey, we have this pocket of money in this pocket and we need it here, but we can't do that. And we need to provide flexibility to our schools, to their budget people and so on to be able to do that. Section 2 allows for mandate relief also through the 28-29 school year. And under this section, school boards would be allowed to delay implementation of many of the new mandates that were imposed in the 23-24 legislative biennium. And before I touch on what some of those mandates are, this is not kicking the can down the road. This is saying, hey, we need to take a pause, take a deep breath, and give districts time, and school boards, superintendents, teachers, and so on, time to implement these carefully and with fidelity, which is another word I heard. That's super important. We don't want to just haphazardly start all these things. I can't imagine all the balls our school districts are trying to juggle at the same time right now. That is impossible. We cannot do that to our teachers and our staff and those leaders in our districts. So what we would do is allow those school boards to make these choices for their districts and delay some of these for a certain time period. So the mandates included in the new requirements from these session laws, it would be the 2023 Early Childhood Omnibus, Chapter 24, the 2023 Education Omnibus, Chapter 55, the 2024 Education Policy Omnibus, Chapter 109, the 2024 Education Finance, Children and Families Omnibus, Chapter 115, the Paid Family and Medical Leave mandated under 2023, Chapter 59, the Earned Sick and Safe Time mandated under 2023, Chapter 53, and also any amendments to these laws that were enacted during the 23-24 biennium. So in either case, whether it's flexible funding or mandate relief, the school board may adopt their action at a resolution during a public meeting. These will be community decisions to delay these or to implement them. That's up to the local school board, and that's what local control is. There may be some mandates that I personally think are very harmful or I don't like, but local control means empowering our local parents, administrators, school board members, teachers, and so on to make these local decisions and also respecting those local decisions. So we offer these options for funding and funding and mandate flexibility in the near term with the expectation that we as lawmakers would then think very hard after listening to testimony like we heard today about imposing any new mandates. I don't want to see any new mandates over the next 2 years, and really consider seriously revising or repealing these existing mandates according to what's needed and what makes sense and what works for our kids. So thank you, Mr. Chair. And if we have time, which I believe we do, I would ask you to recognize Representative Mueller to explain Article 1 and then Representative Bakeberg to explain Article 2.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Madam Chair. Appreciate your presentation. At this point in time, we'll recognize Representative Mueller for her presentation on, I believe, Article 1, correct?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and members of the committee. I'm very excited to be able to talk about, and members of the public, especially those who are here as superintendents and principals. Thank you for being here. Thank you for taking time out of your schedule. I've heard so much about all of this, and I'm very excited to be able to talk about the changes that we are looking at the READ Act. Article 1 does provide revisions to the READ Act as enacted in the 23-24 legislative biennium. We all have heard that we have a shared goal and a shared priority of literacy. No one disagrees with this shared goal. No one disagrees that the READ Act was important, necessary, monumental. However, we had bipartisan consensus that whole language and balanced literacy approach to reading instruction failed. After years of deception, the reading charlatans have been exposed and their frauds have been revealed. And we intend to keep that pressure on to make sure that this does not continue to slide backward. While the READ Act has acknowledged the real problem, as implemented, it is quite simply, and we heard this over and over from you, it is overregulated and underfunded. 100% overregulated and underfunded. I have to acknowledge some of the good faith effort and work that was put into the READ Act, but I also have to acknowledge that in the 2024 session, there were actual work that actually rolled back our goals and our what we are hoping to see with the Read Act implications. So in Article 1, simply, if you have the bill in front of you, if you look just at the very first from lines 1.25 to 2.23, we see that we have an unequivocal commitment to the science of reading and a fundamental belief that every child has the right to read. Period. Nothing else. We are going to be on the science of reading, and every child has the right to read. Going on, we have heard from our school districts that the Department of Education's partnership with the Center for Applied Research and Educational Improvement, also known as CARE, has been very limiting to schools. It has caused some barriers and has taken away funding from our schools, to actually implement this with fidelity. This process has been made worse by new misdirected political goals embedded into the law that distract our focus from foundational literacy skills. So because of that, if you, it will show later on, I guess I didn't mark the, on my bill, that the bill ends the partnership with CARE and directs MDE to take up their primary role in assisting schools. This partnership, directed in this bill, will end this June. We also repeal some of the new requirements included by the 2024 session that have political or ideological purposes, which distracts from the core mission of education. You find that on 5.11 through 13. And then in 9.21 through 9.23, we restore the expectation that teachers, they need to, while they are currently not being properly prepared, and that is a discussion that we need to be talking about with OHE and teacher prep schools and looking at upstream instruction so that we can have our teachers properly prepared. We have the expectation that teachers are not only properly prepared to provide reading instruction, but they also will reinstate an assessment to verify this, and that's on 9.21 and 9.23. Let me just be blunt. Literacy is learning. This isn't a partisan issue. And when kids can't read, I'm going to repeat the line. It's happening. When kids can't read, every book is banned. And we cannot allow our students to be denied a core function of literacy, which is allowing them to function in our society. When we provide a child with the foundational literacy skills, we empower children to become lifelong learners. And so that is why this is Article 1 and is one of our top priorities when we look at our educational leadership. So, Mr. Chair, I'm done with my testimony and would ask that you would now honor Representative Bakeberg with Article 2.
Thank you, Representative Mueller. At this point in time, Representative Bakeberg, you have 3 minutes now. Representative Bakeberg, would you give your presentation of Article 2?
He's never only spoken 3 minutes in his life.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I will try to be brief. That's not one of my gifts. I'll just own that right now. But before I jump into Article 2, I just want to thank all the educators in the room. So, and I think it was a unique perspective shared. It wasn't just Metro. It wasn't just outstate. We had educators, administrators, teachers from across Minnesota sharing a perspective. And frankly, it's not a new perspective because this has been shared over and over again over the last couple years. So thank you. Continue to make your voices heard. And I would challenge all of us as legislators to actually listen and implement what these people are saying, because they are the actual boots on the ground that have to implement what happens at these tables. So with that, Article 2 is amply applied educational innovation because it focuses primarily on empowering schools to be innovative. That's it. So this is accomplished by identifying and revising current statutes that are already in place, but they come with the caveat that districts need to seek permission from the Commissioner of Education, and we are changing that. So these revisions shift the mindset from schools of merely seeking permission from the state to a mindset of trusting our local school officials, our school boards, our educators, and our parents. When these three groups are at the table making decisions at the local level, doing what's best for their local community without the heavy hand of bureaucracy, amazing things can happen. And I bet if we had these testifiers come back up and share what they're doing at their local districts, we would get powerful things that are happening in Farmington, in Chatfield, in Fergus Falls, in Prior Lake, Minnetonka. I look forward to those conversations. But Article 2 is broken down into 3 categories or 3 areas. First, it directs the Department of Education to create a performance report that is user-friendly in common sense language so that educators, parents, taxpayers, normal constituents can actually read and understand. There's a lot of this information already online, but it's putting it in a way that is easily accessible for parents, for educators, for everyone to navigate. We want parents and educators to have easy access to the critical metrics of school performance: reading, math, science, social studies, college and career readiness, to name a few. The foundational aspects of what is important to school. We heard Superintendent Law talk about how we have all of these things that schools are expected to do. When I did my master's program about 20 years ago, one of the slides at Minnesota State Mankato was about all of the items that schools were expected to do. And it went back to 1950s. And then it was in the 1990s. And from the 1950s to the 1990s, it had grown exponentially. And that was 20 years ago. Think about what the expectations are on schools, and we wonder why educators are struggling. To be clear, this is not a report card. We're not grading schools. We want to give information to educators, to parents, to be able to make their own determinations, because when we empower parents, when we empower educators, they will be engaged with us. And as an educator, I want parents to engage in the process, because when that happens, guess what happens? Kids succeed. And that's what we hear that's what we heard today, that everyone is about kids. Secondly, this bill identifies a variety of statutory and session law programs like experiential and applied learning opportunities for students, or innovation zones, which are wonderful, and put the planning and decision-making in the hands of the educators, not the commissioner, not the Department of Education. We also identify several current innovative programs buried inside of 124D and move all of these programs into a new chapter known as educational innovation. And the purpose of that is to empower educators to be able to point to those statutes about why they have the statutory authority to do the work that they want to do. Simply put, it's providing clarity to educators, so that the superintendents, the boards, the teachers can say, this is why we're doing it. Third, we convert the current Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion Center within the Department of Education to get back to the mission of what schools are all about. So we create a new office called the Office of Achievement and Innovation. Very simply, the direct mission of this is for school districts and charter schools, is for the department to help school districts in researching and implementing practices focused on promoting academic achievement in those core areas: reading, math, science, social, college and career readiness, to name a few. The mission comes with one key limitation, and this is important to understand. All opinions and guidance issued by the office or by the department are advisory in nature and are not binding to the locally elected school district or charter school. The decision is made at the local level. This new Office of Achievement and Innovation will serve as a clearinghouse for nonprofits. Far too long, the members of this committee and Education Finance we have heard from nonprofit group after nonprofit group, and we have handpicked which nonprofit groups receive funding and who schools will work with. We shift that dynamic to empower local school districts to determine which nonprofit might be helpful and have the department conduct its due diligence to avoid shady nonprofits from taking advantage of local school districts. Simply put, this entire House File 6 is about empowering educators at the local level to meet their needs. So with that, Mr. Chair, that is Article 2, and it is, I'll turn it back over to Chair Bennett.
Thank you, Representative Bakeberg. I suspect you had more you wanted to share. But at this point in time, I want to thank Representative Bakeberg, Representative Mueller, Chair Bennett. Thank you for your presentation on your bill today. The chair lays over House File 6 for possible inclusion in an omnibus bill to be further considered at a later date. I want to thank for those of you that came today to testify on behalf of the committee. Thank you for being here. Thank you for your testimony. Members, that concludes today's agenda. Our next hearing will be Tuesday, January 28th at 3 p.m. All right, 3 p.m. With that, this committee stands adjourned. Thank you.